This week, we're going to focus on the passion in the Hedera community and how it might be the key to this network's success. We have one of the Hedera builders who found his way onto one of the most popular crypto YouTube channels out there. We have the man who started it all, hitting the streets and staying engaged. We also have a pretty big leadership change in the Hedera ecosystem, and of course, much, much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull. Now, I do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but I don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. I'm just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So the builder that I mentioned there is John Wingate from Bank Social, and the YouTube channel he found himself on was the Paul Barron Network. Talking to Mance, Paul Barron had his interest peaked around exactly what Bank Social is doing. And John did a fantastic job on this channel that has about 500,000 subscribers, representing not just Bank Social, but also the rest of the Hedera ecosystem. He's unapologetic in his support of the network and why he chose it for his business. So I grabbed a few clips from it to show what a great job that John did. So let's check that out.
Speaking of Hedera, I'm looking at a tweet from them at the intersection of blockchain and open banking. They're talking about you guys, Bank Social, the Web3 platform, kind of enabling this next generation here. Why choose Hedera? What was the kind of the genesis of going that direction?
Yeah, I'll just highlight the top three. I think there's many reasons why. The top three for us is you have the whole concept of a validator network, a staking network, right? Who's validating the transactions? With 39 Fortune 500 companies that are known, that are on the council, governance, right? People don't think that's decentralized. I think that's decentralized. I think that's one of the better mechanisms for decentralization that you can have. The collusion resistance, the ability to, in the event that collusion happens, the ability to hold accountability towards those actors, it's unprecedented. When we look at kind of the next piece of why we chose Hedera, it's the fixed fee in dollars. If I'm a business and I'm having to contend with, dollars are doing this all day right now, right? Compared to the rest of the world, the dollar goes up, the dollar goes down. But if my fees, if the gas fees or the network fees are also doing that, and I'm having to counterbalance both of those, it's very hard to run a sustainable business model on that. And so with Hedera, we kind of get the stability of knowing what our fixed cost fees are going to be. And then the third thing that I think just generally for businesses to be fast, nimble, try use cases, try pilots, the infrastructure that was built in the form of, getting a little under the hood with technology, the SDKs, the development kits that were built, multi-language, robust development kits that within a couple hours of seeing the development kit as a developer, very clean, you can get something off the ground.
Have you seen any innovation in the merchant services side? Because obviously businesses in many cases are tied into having to sign up with certain merchant services. That is a huge part of their fees annually that they're paying. And then you have the big struggle, which is the fees that you're paying on the tax you're collecting for the government. So there's multiple issues that are facing retailers and a lot of businesses today. Anything you see coming down the pipe on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, with a couple of our credit union partners, working on some novel plugins to existing merchant service providers like Clover, like some of these other things where they can get banked, Stripe, things like that. So our payments hub already works really closely with Stripe and a couple of these other merchant service providers. But getting it into the form of how do you cut out the heavy 3.5-4% fee?
Yeah.
If we do it on a crypto network, i.e., if we do it on Hedera, where the transaction fee is 0.001, and then we put as a network a very small, de minimis fee on top of that just to maintain the network, you're talking about orders of magnitude, more efficiency, more scales of cost. They're settling in just the same amount of time. They're immutable, right? They're not maintained by one single entity. So many value, paradigms there.
All right, guys. Well, I just got some news from the HBAR Foundation. They are terminating me. So I'm no longer going to be with the HBAR Foundation. I left the beginning of the show the same because technically I am still a contractor until the 10th of September. I've had so much fun working in this capacity, and I do appreciate the HBAR Foundation giving me the opportunity to talk to all the fantastic builders in the space. I do want to try to continue to do my show every week. I'm not going to be able to do it for long unless I find another means of income, but who knows, there may be something else that pops up in the Hedera ecosystem that allows me to continue doing what I love doing and covering this great space and maybe having a little bit more influence on exactly what happens. I will say that I was critical of some of the stuff that was going on in the HBAR Foundation, so I understand why they felt that they had to let me go, but I also think that there's some other major changes that have to happen in the ecosystem if we want to make sure that Hedera can become all that it can be. But let's get back to the show because we have a lot more to cover, continuing back with the clip that we just showed from Paul Barron Network. Now, John absolutely has that passion that I'm talking about for talking about his business and the rest of the Hedera ecosystem. But the other thing about this that struck me was we hadn't heard that much come out of Bank Social for a little while. We talked about them a lot in the spring, but now they've sprung up again, and now they're getting a lot of attention. They have a lot more things that are coming out, as you'll notice if you watch the rest of that Paul Barron interview. Now, this goes for a lot of use cases we have in the Hedera ecosystem. Just because you're not hearing about it on a daily basis doesn't mean there's not a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and we're not going to see a lot of fruits of that labor later on down the line. I mean, I can give so many examples. We have Shinhan Bank. Of course, they had their cross-border payment use case. We have EDF, the largest electricity producer in the world. They have a few projects they were working on with Hedera. The one that I liked most was a DePIN project called Hedge, which stands for Hedera, Google, and EDF. We have Hyundai, which is a supply chain use case similar to Atma.io, blockchain for energy, which includes Chevron, Exxon, Schlumberger, and Saudi Aramco. Now, we don't exactly know what that consortium is doing at this point, but considering Hedera is the only DLT, the only blockchain that's in this consortium, I think there's a lot to be excited about. In the very beginning of the year, we talked to Bobby from SKUX, who is working with Hedera Governing Council's Mondelez on payments and coupons. Zenny in the travel industry has me really excited. And the one thing that I like about Zenny is they're not talking to the Web3 audience. They're talking to their customers, which are travel professionals, travel agents. And then the gaming ecosystem. I couldn't be more excited about what's going on there with Circle of Games, with Doctor Who Worlds Apart, Earthlings, and then the list goes on. There's others that have kind of gone quiet, but that's what they're doing. They're building their games, and we're going to hear more about them before too long. Been talking the past few weeks an awful lot about our refi ecosystem, the Guardian ecosystem, and how it could generate a significant amount of revenue for the network. And then probably one of my favorites is DePIN, with WiseSat, WiseKey, CLSQ, and of course, I'm not going to forget about Neuron. So of course, we're focusing on retail and onboarding those next billion users, but we also want to focus on onboarding the next trillion objects through the Internet of Things, and that's what those teams are focused on. But getting back to John and Bank Social, he's a true HBAR-barian. He believes in the vision that we have going forward. Again, he did a great and unapologetic job representing his business and the Hedera ecosystem, so I thank him for that. We also have another really passionate guy that I'm proud to call a friend in Milan. He's really talented. He's self-taught in building in this space. And he's also the one who coined the term that has made me focus so much on passion today, and that's intrinsic motivation. So we're going to talk to him here real quick about Nomid, his latest project, and some of that intrinsic motivation and why it's the key to success here. Milan, welcome. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. Great to be here.
So, Milan, to start this off, can you just tell us a bit about your Hedera journey and some of the things that you've built to this point?
Absolutely. So I think it started about a little bit less than 4 years ago, and it was around the whole blockchain hype, and you saw it everywhere. And, I was very skeptic because people were talking about these real world use cases and how it will change the world. And, I was looking at the blockchains and what their selling points will be then. And I was like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't see it applied in real world use cases. And then somebody told me, well, take a look at Hedera. And then I was like, okay, now I can see it, right? This is how it makes sense. It makes sense to have fees pegged to the dollar. I only know Hedera that does that. I mean, it's completely non-speculative, which I kind of liked. But it makes sense in the business aspect. It makes sense. The finality is so quick, like less than 5 seconds, secure. So that's kind of when I started thinking, okay, now I can see it's applied into real world use cases. So initially, I really started just learning a lot about Hedera. And then over the years, I became involved with several projects. Initially with Nomid, for example, as one of the first NFT marketplace on Hedera. That was in 2021. And then I kind of also wanted to develop on Hedera. That's kind of what I really wanted to do. My username was also Hedera Dev, but I was not at all a developer. So I found my way in no code, really by making like complex workflows. And that was really cool. Yeah, so then I became more involved with, or became team member of Earthlings, which is a gaming metaverse built on Hedera. I've built my, and M building, obviously, is its continuous work, a honey traceability system on Hedera. And also very much involved as one of the leaders of the HBAR Foundry, which is a group of builders on Hedera. Yeah, so since the beginning of this year, I really started to dive into coding. So I learned myself to code, and well, I mean, I built this payment system, which is pretty cool.
Well, we're going to get into that here in just a minute, but let's not forget about some of your past hackathon experiences. You had Geotap as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was really fun to make. I mean, that's a year ago. Geotap, which I later renamed to Tepo. How it worked is with your phone, you could collect NFTs and you could place them all over the world because I would use NFC tags that you can place, but they have a special verification within them. So they have their own private key as well. And you can't copy them. You can't cheat with it. It was really exciting to build that. It became kind of like a proof of presence concept. And that's another example of how, I really love turning the intangible into tangible, right? What we're all talking about and think, okay, this is why blockchain was invented. Look at all these possibilities, those airy thoughts. I like to make them in concrete, tangible solutions that instead of 1% of the people that follow those train of thoughts of the potential, that actually the rest of the 99% of people also think, oh, now I get it. Yeah, that's how I totally would use it. I can start using it today.
And we're going to go on to your latest hackathon entry. It's a payment system. You already mentioned it, Nomid. It's getting all kinds of attention across social media and elsewhere. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so first, how did I came at that idea? I mean, when the hackathon started, it's the end of July, then you kind of have 4 weeks to build something. You really have to start at that moment. You are allowed to ideate on what you're going to build, but I wasn't even that far, right? I was just like, oh, I want to do something with NFCs again, because NFC is always a nice bridge between the intangible to the tangible. So the first 2 weeks was actually trying to crack some stuff that I couldn't figure out with NFCs. So that's the first 2 weeks that I worked on that. And then I started thinking, okay, well, the finish line is there 2 weeks, and I don't have anything yet. And I thought, okay, so how, again, going back to how people start using something, how they would be able to leverage the benefits of Hedera. How do you apply that onto an existing system that everybody's using by providing added benefits, by providing added value? Because it doesn't make any sense to build something just because you have used it. I mean, yeah, but we use blockchain. Yeah, but what's the added benefit? So that's kind of where I thought, okay, but we're all used to pay with credit cards nowadays with your phone, right? You tap and you pay. We are used to that. So mimic that system and then apply the layer of Hedera on top of it, providing its benefits. And what's the biggest benefits? Well, first of all, why can you do that with Hedera? Is because it's fast and secure. And then obviously the fees are pegged in dollars. So you know what you're going to pay as a company. And it's quick and it's cheap. So instead of like 2 to 3% fees that you pay normally in a card transaction, you pay 1/5 of a cent and the whole payment is complete. So I've now given you like the whole thing in reverse, because I now started talking about how I came with it. But what is it? So Nomid is a, I would say, peer-to-peer payment system, a really focused on providing it from start to end point. So while mimicking our existing habits. So what does it mean? In short, you will have, I need to grab the device now. You will have like this is the payment system that I created. This is the terminal. You will start with the terminal, putting in the amount that you have to pay. You tap to identify so that the transaction is created. And then you get a confirmation on your phone, you approve it, and then the payment is complete, which means that you have paid in a stable coin. Because right now I've used USDC because everybody knows it, but you can use any stable coin or any token for that matter. You've created a instant payment, a settlement between you buying an ice cream and the vendor, the ice cream seller, getting the payment instantly. So while also already paying for the fees to Nomid, where it's really a fraction of the fees that they would normally pay with any other traditional system. It's completely mimicked of our current habits and instant secure payment.
The reason why this is so important is under the previous system, the credit card system that we currently use over the internet and for everything, it's all a credit system. It's a credit card because the processing of that, the actual settlement, takes days. And who's taking the risk in between that? It's the credit card company that takes the risk. If there's some kind of an issue, they're the ones that are going to have to cover it. And for that, and for VisaNet, for the entire system, they take 3 to 5% or whatever it is. I know, I think the average is actually 1.6%, but it can be really significant. And who's shouldering that? It's the vendors, it's the retailers, which of course passes on that cost to you. But with this, we cut that down to the cost of a transaction on Hedera. And if these are tokens created on Hedera, it's only 1/10 of a cent. So this is great for not just the users, but it's also great for the retailer. Also, we cut out that middleman. It's fantastic all around. The only thing that's missing is for the Hedera ecosystem to have a quick on and off ramp, being able to get into USDC and out of USDC into your bank account. Now, that's pretty easy generally. If Coinbase were to support it, we'd be able to get on and off very easily, but we don't have that quite yet. So that's the last piece of the puzzle that's missing. But I'm really impressed with what I've seen come out of this so far. But I do want to broaden this out a bit. You've built another great use case on Hedera. It just needs a few little pieces to finish that entire picture. But I've also heard you talk about intrinsic motivation. And I'd like you to explain why you think that's important for the Hedera ecosystem.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Brandon. And I love the intrinsic motivation topic because it's pure gold, right? And I think as leaders, if you are able to recognize that, you have a once in a lifetime opportunity, because intrinsic motivation, if it's not nurtured, if it's not taken care of, if it's not recognized, it dies off. I mean, that's just it's just how it is. And so if you compare intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation, you kind of do the job. You get paid to do the job, depending where you work, obviously, but just do the job and then you kind of go, okay, I'm fine. Now with intrinsic motivation, at least how I experienced it personally, is that you have a vision, you are motivated, you believe in something, and everything inside you drives for it and goes for it, and you're gonna make it happen, right? There's no limit in time. You just wake up early in the morning and keep on going till late night because this is something you believe in and you're going to make it happen. Now we have a lot of intrinsic motivated people within the Hedera ecosystem and within the Hedera community, I should say. Now these people, again, I'm going to say it again, they are pure gold, right? And they provide constant value to Hedera as a network, and they go far and beyond to anything else you could expect from anybody, right? I think it's intrinsic motivation that creates new opportunities, um, drives innovation, creates the real gems out there. I mean, I built this system in 2 weeks, which is just, because I like doing it. I see it in front of me as I'm going to make it happen, right? It's just no other way. I'm going to do it, and there's no one who's paying me for it or telling me to do it. It's just because I'm going to do it. And as leaderships within the ecosystem, I think there are many opportunities to harness that intrinsic motivation. I think those people that have that inner drive are also willing to contribute and to go further and to help Hedera to get to the next level, multiple levels. I would say. I mean, we're not talking about one level; we're talking about skyrocketing. There's like this whole group of amazing people that can absolutely push it far and beyond. And for me, to the leadership, I would say they are there, they're ready. Harness that, and we'll get it far and beyond.
Well, that's one of the things. I think I'm probably one of those kind of people. It doesn't necessarily have to be builders coming out with products. It can also be people that are creating content. There's all kinds of different intrinsically motivated people that are just willing to do the job, even if they're not getting paid. We certainly want these people to be compensated in some way if it's at all possible. But that's the thing. Like I would love doing this job regardless. The only reason why I need a paycheck is because, of course, I have to support my family and so forth. But I just enjoy doing it. I love waking up, being able to talk to people like you, seeing the progress we can make in the Hedera ecosystem, and realizing the potential of the Hedera ecosystem. We know that potential's there. We have the tech. We have, a lot of the frameworks that we need. Now we have a lot of the infrastructure that we need. We just need to realize that potential, and it's people that are intrinsically motivated that are going to get us there. It's also not necessarily just people that are in the community doing these things for free. There are people that are employees at Hashgraph, at the HBAR Foundation, within these different entities that have that intrinsic motivation. They just wake up and they want to do great for the Hedera ecosystem. But we just need to identify those people and empower them to do as much as they possibly can, because they're going to do it anyway. But I think this is a great point. You've brought it up over and over again, Milan, and I think it's something that really needs to be hammered home. But I want to get back to you personally one more time. If there's anything you could do within the Hedera ecosystem, what would it be?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, what I love doing is creating. I mean, I was kind of like inventing. I like inventing stuff to build, create, invent. Just give me like this playground, and I'll build super cool stuff. That's my thing. And then at the same time, not having to worry, obviously, about your bread and butter. But that's that's definitely my kind of my wish, I would say. And but I mean, I know that's going to happen. I mean, that's just the same in a drive. I'll just work towards that. And I'm kind of already doing that. I do a lot of stuff that I really enjoy, and building and contributing. So yeah, and I'll just keep doing that. And yeah, who knows?
So you want to just continue inventing. I guess the other piece to that puzzle is teams that are interested in bringing things to market. They want those good ideas, and they're good at actually bringing them to market and getting them to something that the rest of the world can use. So I guess if there's teams out there that want some of these products that Milan is working on, I'm sure Milan would work with you guys to take them to the next level and come up with business plans and so forth. So if anybody's interested, we could certainly get you in touch with Milan.
Absolutely. I'm not. I would say I'm not. I'm not the person for a business plan. That's definitely not my thing. But definitely, if you have a problem to be solved, I prefer real world problems, tangible ones. Then I definitely reach out. anytime. I mean, anybody can reach out. I mean, most people know that they can always reach me and for any question, really.
Absolutely. Well, Milan, thank you so much for building on Hedera, and good luck with all your projects.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
So, like I said there, even though I believe that the passion by some of the individuals in the Hedera community is absolutely unparalleled, there's an awful lot of those intrinsically motivated people within these organizations as well. And the leader himself, Leemon is no exception there. He wakes up and he's thinking about things around the Hedera network and how to take our network to the next level. He did a really great job at an open source forum. Now, during this discussion, he talked about some of the Hedera use cases, ones that we talk about all the time in Atma.io and Archax and Mondelez, but he also talked about two that we don't talk about very often. One of them was Equity Labs. We caught up on that one a few months ago, but he gave us some more insights on exactly what they're doing. And then one that I hadn't heard about at all, and that's OpenSpan. So let's take a listen to a couple clips from that forum to get Leemon's take.
Similarly, OneSpan is doing this with documents. Signatures on documents and keeping track of the document and time-stamping a document so that you know for sure that this document was signed on a certain date and it will not be able to be broken. This chain of hashes, SHA-384, which we believe is post-quantum, means that even quantum computers won't be able to break that chain in the future. And so when you sign your document, you can have a record that it existed on this date, every bit of it is exactly what you're claiming, and you can never go back and change it. You can't go cook the books. Again, you couldn't do that with a single server unless you had 100% trust in the person running that server and you trusted them to never be hacked. Of course, no one's ever hacked, so it's not a problem. But you can do that. And so OneSpan is doing this right now. And they're doing this on Hedera, but it's again a place where it makes a difference and gives you trust that you wouldn't have without a ledger. Just using a database on a single server wouldn't do it. It's bringing something new. And why did they do this? What they really liked was the low and predictable fees. So anytime you store one of these pieces of information on Hedera, it is 1/10 of a cent. It's 1/1000th of a US dollar. And the price of the cryptocurrency can go up and down wildly, but your cost is still exactly 1/1000th of a US dollar. It's independent of the fluctuations of the cryptocurrency price. It's predictable. And when you're doing something important, you want to be able to predict your costs. And that was important. And then scalable was important, being able to go to 10,000 TPS just in a single shard, and we can go to multiple shards and go to unlimited TPS as it ramps up. This was important. And then, of course, being able to be secure for the future. And the chain of hashes is actually unusually large, 384 rather than 256, just so that it is post-quantum. So this is something that appealed to them and why they decided to build on it. And that's why they're running right now. And then we have Equity Lab. I love this. We talked about the AI hype. And like every hype cycle, many things are overhyped, including all of humanity will be dead in 10 years because of AI. And AI will eliminate all of our jobs. Okay, that's all hype. But there is going to be useful things with AI. But we have to be able to trust it. And so they're doing all of this thing on the supply chain of what training data trained your model. And they're doing a climate GPT model and improving the provenance of the data. And it can track, just like we'd had physical supply chains, they can track software supply chains. Somebody asked me yesterday, hey, how can we do software supply chains? And we said, hey, Equity Lab, go talk to them. They're doing it right now on training models and what training data and having the history of that.
Now, next up, we're going to go to somebody who probably has the most passion in the space, and right up there with Leemon. He might be a little bit above, he might be a little bit below, but right up there in the most important people going forward for the Hedera ecosystem is Rob Allen. Of course, we hear from him every week, but the work that he's doing in the space is absolutely critical to Hedera. But he takes time away from that work to answer our questions in the Hedera ecosystem, and I can't tell him how much I appreciate all the work that he does. But without further delay, let's check out Shark Bites. Rob, welcome back. Is it still chilly down there? Because it's 94 degrees up here right now.
Oh, wow. No, it's warming up now. We're getting those beautiful spring days here, which are like summer back in UK. So we've got a good long season ahead of us, which is
Well,
awesome.
perfect. Well, we're going to get some storms tonight, and it's going to drop by about 16 degrees. It's only going to go up to about 78 tomorrow. So yeah, big swing for us here. We're going to jump right into these questions, Rob. The first one comes from Tyler Stock, 6787. Actually, we do have a couple here around Fresh Supply Co. So he says, I don't understand what Fresh Supply Company is doing with tokenizing requests for payments of money. If the payment is being made outside of Hedera, what value does this have for the users? What am I missing? EDI is what most large organizations use and costs around 5 cents per transaction. So are we just matching existing tech but wrapping it in Web3 and AI? Still confused.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and the interview with David at Fresh Supply Company last week was really enlightening. Actually, I've not spoken to him for some time, but the advances they've made, especially with their relationships, I think one of their superpowers is actually drawing in the likes of MasterCard and banks and other parties. Where they're focused is tokenized deposit. So we talk a lot about stable coins, but a stable coin in terms of a fiat-backed stable coin, I mean, it doesn't have to be fiat-backed. A stablecoin issuer takes the fiat money, escrows it, and then issues the equivalent amount of token, which can then be used quite kind of openly on public blockchains. Tokenized deposits are more TradFi leaning examples of kind of similar tokenized value. So I like to think of tokenized deposits as sort of tokenized claims on the bank's balance sheet. It's an obligation on that issuer of that tokenized deposit to redeem it on request, similar to bank accounts that we're all familiar with. And it's a mechanism for transferring value in a way between trusted parties, like between banks and payments systems. So the MasterCard multi-token network (MTN) can transfer these types of token between its members. And MasterCard is a member scheme and network. So what Fresh Supply Company have enabled is the tokenization of these kinds of these tokenized deposits on Hedera and integrated with the multi-token network so that use cases over the top can utilize it. I mean, MTN can be used for many different types of use case, and everything from cross-border payments to bank-to-bank transfers, settlement use cases. And it sounds like Fresh Supply Company are kind of focusing at that top end of town with the, David referred to target addressable market of trillions of dollars. But these are big back end transfers of value, and the multi-token network kind of enables all that. And Fresh Supply Company appear to be enabling part of that tokenization of that value for them. So very excited about this. I mean, David is a force of nature, and I would certainly support him in all his endeavors in what he's doing. I know there's a few other things that Fresh Supply Company are involved in as well. So very excited to see how that business is growing, and that's supported by the foundation as well. So it's one of Sabrina's grants, I believe, which is an excellent one if my opinion counts.
Now, the next question we have also touches on Fresh Supply Co., but it's really more about fees. It comes from Square Root -1, who says, smart contract calls cost 5 cents. Of course, they're quoting us from last week. That's actually quite expensive compared to many other DLTs where costs are 1/10 of that. Really love the tech. Fresh Supply Company use is very promising, but how would you say this is competitive in a few years against other high throughput DLTs? Thanks. So, Rob, I have two things to say about this. The first thing that I want to mention is smart contracts are inherently less efficient, right? We talk about that a fair amount. And the token transfers can process about, we'll say, 30,000 transactions per second. Now, I know it's throttled down to 10,000, but we'll just use 30,000 to make it a nice round number. Well, if the smart contract can handle about 300 transactions per second, that's about what they say we can handle. That's 100 to 1, right? So that's the ratio between the two. Well, token transfers cost 1/10 of a cent. these smart contract calls cost 5 cents. So the ratio is about right. The other thing that I want to mention is Hedera is the most efficient network on earth, right? So that means we have the most margin to be able to reduce those fees if necessary. So if the pricing point of one of these fees isn't competitive or something along those lines, we can certainly adjust it. But right now it looks like, based off of how many transactions we can process, about 350 transactions per second for smart contracts and about 30,000, we'll say, per shard for token transfers, that ratio seems about right to me. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think, and I say this very often, that the native services of token service, consensus service, are there to be used. They're super cheap. Remember, they're not only low fees, they're predictably low because of the pegging to fiat, which is essential, critical for enterprise use cases and smaller, startup use cases as well, being able to predict one's operating costs over time. Most businesses look to scale. Scale is where all the profit is usually in some of these businesses, and so one needs to be able to be sure that that network will scale, which Hedera can, and provably so. The question also refers to other networks. Well, the scalable ones tend to have been pushed to layer 2s, and layer 2s are always a compromise. They're a compromise on security, or they're a compromise on decentralization. In order to get that scalability, we don't have that problem. So Fresh Supply Company and every other payments use case and scalability use case actually that we're seeing on the network or coming to the network understands that those core principles, which we've been talking about for 6-7 years more, are still there, and they are the reasons that people build on Hedera. It's really, really important to understand one's operating expenses versus the revenue for Hedera as well. Not just the builders building on top of it. So, and you rightly say the price of those transactions can be varied over time and tweaked based on governing council deliberations. But I think it's about right for now. I mean, personally think the consensus service is probably too cheap in many ways. So I think we could get a lot of revenue for a lot more revenue for less impact. But that's not the current pricing model. So I think we got it just about right.
All right, that's fair enough. Now, I mean, it's the same thing, right? So it's 500 to 1 between a smart contract call and HCS. So that's a little bit off in the other direction. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, as all the use cases come along, of course, they'll be informed by the different levels of fees, but also we will see, which types of use case are thriving on the Hedera network, and potentially adjust accordingly. But the more that there are, the harder it is to change the model without impacting their businesses.
Well, it's supply and demand, right? So,
of course, yeah.
All right, makes sense. So, speaking of the projections and roadmap, HBAR Al asks, "What's the council's projection of network usage in the next 5 years?" Rob, does the council even make these kind of projections?
It doesn't. It's keenly interested in it, and what normally happens is in the in-person meetings, we have the foundations in attendance to report on their progress and explain some of the great use cases that are coming along. And as part of that, there are they're in the best places to forecast, because all of the grants that are given. Most of the grants that are given will project their, as part of their case, their growth predictions over time. So the aggregation of all of those grantees over a period of time gives us a range. It's quite a wide range from top to bottom, but and I not at liberty to say what it was, and actually it changes every time we meet. But I mean, it's significant year-on-year growth, as you would expect if some of these big use cases, that have a lead time to come to production and then have a scaling lead time, which could be years, right? So, but you add all of those together and you kind of model it. There is year-on-year growth, which we've kind of seen in the last 2 years, right? From a very low base to Atma coming on and having a big step up. I think it's about $3.5 million revenue last year or something like that. So year on year, we're expecting, a significant growth, and let's see.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to kind of, on some level, whether it's done at the foundation level, whether it's done at the council member level, you have to kind of make some projections on, what our revenue is going to look like to measure how far our runway is as far as HBAR and the Treasury and so forth, right?
Yeah, and we're all looking for the next ATMA. There are a number of candidates for the next ATMA actually, but that doesn't mean that on day one there'll be another 2,000-3,000 transactions per second. It will be, I would imagine, a ramp. And then, of course, we're talking about TPS rather than revenue. And revenue, as we often talk about, is that mix. And we want use cases that have presumably fewer transactions per second, but higher, more valuable transactions being used.
That's fair.
So, all of that is a very uncertain science. But year-on-year growth, and at some point, I suspect critical mass will be hit, and then, the Cambrian explosion happens.
That's what we're hoping for. Okay, we have a couple here on regulation. Soham asks, given the evolving landscape of blockchain regulation, how is Hedera positioning itself to lead in compliance and regulatory-friendly environments? Oops asks another one. He says, hi, Rob. How's regulation in Australia progressing? Can you envisage Australians using a Hedera native stablecoin in the future? So I know I lumped a couple there together, but what are your thoughts on regulation here?
It's a massive topic, especially this year, of course, with the presidential progress in the US and the world holding its breath. That said, behind the scenes, Hedera has a chief policy officer, Lil Minnie Rubin, who is extremely active in the halls of power. She's very, very good at getting Hedera a place at the table. Our GovCom, our Governance Regulatory Committee, which is basically a lot of the general counsels from the governing council members, sits every month or so to deliberate and target the right regulations and support the governing council members in terms of understanding the regulatory landscape globally. I've just encouraged Nomid and Hedera to join Blockchain Australia a couple of months ago, and we in Australia have this industry association which has access and an educative responsibility for the environment here and the politicians as they come and go. That model is repeated in many places around the world where we have strong presence. So it's quite a quiet and back room process, but I'm really encouraged that, and of course we can't force the pace of regulation. It's the best we can do is to be at the table and provide a perspective and influence. And actually, Hedera has very, very good credentials in doing this. The fact that we have this governing council, we have this strength in enterprise, and we have the contacts and relationships through both through the governing council and Hedera LLC itself, and through initiatives like our presence at Davos and everything else puts us in a very, very strong position. Bilaterally in terms of communication flow and understanding our posture, which has been traditionally super risk averse, both good and bad, of course. And in Australia, the second part of the question, we have we have been behind the curve. It's fairly typical for Australia being, not being on the bleeding edge of regulatory change, but a close follower. And our equivalent of the SEC is ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. They have that responsibility. They are, I think, following the SEC's standing process of regulation through enforcement. A couple of big cases here, Block Earner and Kraken, that have been kind of testing the waters. But ASIC are now set out their plans for next year, which provides some clarity around their process in in regulating digital assets. And our treasury, the government treasury, is actually now what will be issuing regulation next year and has a kind of legislative process for the regulating of digital asset platforms, which coupled with a clearer licensing framework for stablecoin issuers and other digital asset providers, should put us in a far better place next year.
And the last part of Oobs' question there was specifically asking about stable coins. Do you envision that being a potential use case that's going to explode there in Australia?
Well, totally, 100%. I mean, I'm kind of, I am very positive that next year we will have strong regulatory support for digital assets, including stablecoins. The direction of travel looks like they'll be licensed as stored value facilities. So a stablecoin effectively could be treated like a gift card or other stored value facility in it. SVF, we call them. Mm-hmm. And there's a very clear set of guidelines and framework for how that operates. It's not the case at the moment. It's kind of a non-cash payment facility type uncertain regulation. But we've got a number of stablecoin issuers, and I'm talking to them all about the potential for issuing onto Hedera.
I figure we'll get the news from you first there, Rob. So the next question comes from Starch78, who says, I really believe micropayments can be a game-changing use case for DLT. He's obviously preaching to the choir with us too. So, for example, paying a fraction of a cent to read an article as opposed to purchasing a subscription, potentially creating a greater freedom of press too. Are media entities aware of Hedera for this? So, of course, we have teams like Drop that are working on this. I think that for Hedera, having the ability, the on-ramps and off-ramps, and I've talked about this a fair amount with Milan, we were talking about it with Nomid, having those on-ramps and off-ramps to be able to get from stable coins into regular currency into your bank account, whether you're a business or you're an individual, I think that will make a big difference for Hedera, because if we can just use those USDC stable coins for those payments, it'll make things a lot easier. But Rob, this is right up your alley. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we should probably do a whole show on micropayments. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I mean, yes, it's the reason I'm here. It's the reason that I came to Hedera in the first place as a 25-year plus payments guy. And finding that that micropayments, isn't serviced by any of the current traditional payments rails. So it's a huge opportunity, and we're seeing this emerging. I mean, the streaming value use case is actually what we started with at FPOS, the pay-per-page, pay-per-view, pay-per thing off the back of the daily timestamp.
Daily timestamp, yep.
A legendary use case that Hedera first kind of put out into the wild. So all of those things for me are, require a network like Hedera. And, I think Hedera has, in all that time, all those years, has not been surpassed. And I find it very difficult to think that any other layer one network will surpass Hedera in this. The other layer ones that claim scalability don't have all the other aspects that you need to have a payments platform. The security, the trust, the potential for privacy, the sustainability of the network. All of the things that we preach about Hedera are necessary within payments networks. So if you can issue stable coins or any other tokenized value on a highly scalable network, and we can transfer it, at thousands of transactions a second, tens of thousands, then you've effectively got micropayments. So what will you do with that? Micropayments isn't a use case; it's a capability in my mind. So what are the use cases on top? And they are legion. We talked about streaming of value. That in itself is a capability rather than a use case. So you apply that to media, you can apply it to any form of receipt of value in a tiny and real time way. We talked to over the years. I've talked to many organisations who are really keen on how do you pay for things at concerts, in a concert stadium, when you're there with your phone and you're paying for additional value for the artist that you're looking at. That's a great use case. How do you pay for transport, per bus stop or per train stop or something like that? Small units of value. The thing is, And you can see I'm on a on a roll now because
I know what's coming next.
This.
I know what's coming next because all those are things you choose to do. You choose to read an article. You choose to stream something. You choose to, make the payment to an Uber or something along those lines. But the next thing is automatic payment. Internet of Things, deep in.
Yeah. So you're going down this spectrum. Mm-hmm. We've got traditional rails here, and some countries are better than others in terms of real-time payments. But there's a cost to those payments, which is actually quite murky. It's quite difficult to work out the unit cost of payments because the routing of those payments all incur different types of costs. But if you ask MasterCard, I think they say that a cup of coffee or anything less than $10 is a micropayment. Mm-hmm. If you look at traditional payment systems, it's probably 10 cents, 10, 15 cents to actually make a transfer. So if you're talking about 1 cent and less, and I use 1 cent as my micropayments kind of threshold, there's a massive amount of opportunity at that end of the spectrum that Hedera could service. And once the rails are in, and you rightly say, the on-ramps and off-ramps are really key to this. The primitives like stable coins like USDC and other units of value are really, really important. So being able to custody them, being able to buy them, being able to off-ramp them. But once that infrastructure is in place, and it's all really, really close to coming on for Hedera, we have the infrastructure that you can build some really compelling use cases where you don't have to be tied to add revenue in order to make a use case kind of commercially viable. Your customers don't have to be the product anymore because they're getting services for free, but you're actually monetizing them in a different way because the margins at scale can be very small. Entirely new commercial models are created. Super exciting. Let's do a micropayments dedicated show.
We'll do it up. All right. So the next one comes from Greg P611, who asks, Brandon, is there anything that Hedera can do to change the way the internet is full of bots, scammers, etc., like help make the internet a trusted place with true real-world digital identities? Rob, this is what it's all about, right? The trust layer of the internet.
Yeah, and quite rightly, digital identity was mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
The identity of things, as a layer or as an augmentation of the Internet of Things is very real. So how do we, and bots and scammers, the verifiable credentials associated with being human, or not even being a human, being a delegated bot of a human that has the authority or the right to do that thing. And then being able to have that identity verified by a third party, so that they can prove that it's not, a scam, is what it's all about. Like you said, trust layer of the internet. But you need to be able to do that at scale. So guess what? We've got a network that does that.
There you go. All right. So Dal4292 says, question for Rob. I recall him mentioning a while ago that he never sold HBAR yet. Is that true? Is that an ethos of HODL we can build on in the Hedera leadership ecosystem? So Rob, I believe I remember you saying the same thing.
I did. It is true.
Yeah.
But with the caveat. So I've never off-ramped back into fiat any HBAR, which is bad, right? Because I've had to pay taxes out of fiat without actually realizing the HBAR. But I have purchased, and I do use a portion of the HBAR that I hold to interact with projects and tokens, HTS tokens in our ecosystem, which I think is what it's for, right? I mean, it's hodling is one thing. And in fact, my business name is not Nodal, which is a conflation of nodes and hodl. So, that's my mindset. It's a long-term thing. And I don't have the right mentality to trade or just do anything with it, right? So I acquire and I play on that end with the Hedera token service and the projects that I really enjoy interacting with. So, yes, I've never sold any HBAR. Maybe I need a strategy to do that.
Oh, come on! The DIP programs out there. That's what
I know the DIP program. Yeah, no, I've looked at your DIP program. It looks really good. I think my thresholds are a little higher than need to be.
Well, here's how I look at it. If you've taken capital from another industry, another job that you've worked at, and you've put that into the Hedera ecosystem, you can buy and sell all you want. But if you've gotten it as some kind of compensation, be a little bit more conservative with it. Wait until we're a little bit more sustainable. Hold on to that, because I think it's going to, do well for you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we have one more for you, Rob. This one comes from Captain Jack H. Barkey himself, the captain. When will Rob get Barkey? And of course, we're talking about the barking game here. I've been playing it a fair amount, and I think by this point, you've actually played it a little bit yourself.
Yeah, I've got a lot barkier in the last week. I had to go and buy some more HBAR, so that's because I found that I was only barking once a day, and then I was depleting all my minimal value. So I guess it's by design that I then had to go out and buy some more, because I was looking very cheap at one point. So yeah, I think it's a great showcase for some fun that we can have, and we need some fun in the ecosystem at the moment. So all kudos to Ash and his barking crew for the game. I love it.
I love the simplicity of it. My new strategy is to go after people like Elon Musk and thought leaders out there and just start barking at them. And
I saw that.
What are they doing? What is this HBAR stuff? And then maybe at some point somebody will go and try to figure out what it is and get involved with it themselves. So either way, it's fun for our community, and hopefully we can use it to expand the community as well.
It's so simple, and once you kind of understand it, it's great. And I love the one of my favorite films is 101 Dalmatians. I just love that scene where they're communicating across the country by barking. Whenever I think of it, that's what I imagine. These beacons of communication going across the internet, and the HBARbarians are the ones who are doing the barking.
Perfect. So, Rob, I've been saying this every single week that the questions are fantastic. And every single week in and week out, it seems like they're getting even better. I think people are getting used to asking the questions and so forth. But great questions again. So we appreciate the community throwing those out there. Drop them down in the comments if you have any more. Rob, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brandon. See you next week.
So again, a huge shout out to Rob there. Thanks for all that he does for our ecosystem. Now, one of the questions we got a few months ago for Shark Bites was, why hadn't the meeting minutes been released for the past few months? Now, we got a couple of them released recently, so I'm going to run through those real quick as well. I'm going to cover the minutes for the June and July meetings. There were 9 council members missing from the June meeting, so not a bad turnout. One of the big highlights for this meeting was Hedera President Charles highlighting the breakout sessions from the last in-person meeting. Apparently, these breakout sessions are really productive, and the topics included charitable use cases, AI governance, and tokenization. The chairman, Brett, covered the market integrity policy. It was also announced that the $50,000 council member recruitment bonus has been sunset, citing what Rob often mentions, that there is a strong pipeline of candidates, thus additional incentive probably isn't needed. The July meeting was nearly canceled due to it being vacation season, explaining why 13 council members were absent, but with several important matters to address, they decided to hold the meeting. I loved Rob's highlighting of DeFi in his CorpCom presentation, showing at least some retail focus. Charles also mentioned that he is going to be reaching out to council members individually to discuss Hedera network participation. In addition, the breakout sessions mentioned from the past meetings, particularly charitable use cases and AI. And these have resulted in the formation of working groups. Leemon highlighted the need to define terminology industry-wide for policymakers, as there could be confusion over words such as transaction, which has a specific legal definition in the world of finance. Finally, Brett gave an update on the governance task force, which may indicate that there are more changes to come in the Hedera space. And before we get into network analysis, I'd be remiss not to say that Shane, the CEO of the HBAR Foundation, has stepped down. In the official post coming from the foundation, it said, the HBAR Foundation today announced that Shane Higdon is stepping down from his position as CEO effective August 31st, 2024. The foundation's senior leadership will continue to manage day-to-day operations, ensuring that all ongoing initiatives remain on track. The HBAR Foundation remains committed to the continuous evolution, progress, and ongoing support of the Hedera ecosystem. We may have more on that in the future, but for right now, we're just going to go with that official statement. And with that, let's get into some network analysis. Taking a look at transaction volume, we did see a dip midweek, but right now we're cruising along at about 2,200 transactions per second with a max TPS of over 7,800, which allowed us to process over 1.1 billion transactions just over the past 7 days. All this while maintaining a 3-second flat time to consensus finality. We also created over 70,000 accounts this past week. Moving down to our fungible tokens, Wrapped HBAR took the top spot, followed by Karate, Dovu, WAR, and Native USDC. Next up, we have Sauce, the meme coin Zero, Siki's token, XSauce, and Energy Trade token. Looking at our fungible tokens, the Malaysian student credential token took the top spot, followed by Doctor Who Worlds Apart. The Saucer Swap liquidity provider token was up next. Wart, the Road Code 2024 access card, Hodl D's Nuts, and despite the name, the guy behind that does a lot of good. Then we have the May Madness 2024 trophies and 2 LP tokens from SilkSwap and HeliSwap. And I'm impressed to see that SilkSwap is actually on top there. And to round out the top 10, we have Not a Slime World's NFT. And the featured NFT collection this week is the Dead Pixels Ghost Club, one of my absolute favorites. And they must have some pretty exciting stuff coming up because I've been seeing some chatter on X. From their official account, it said the time is fast approaching, and Will, the founder, said this one will be more than just a drop. He went on to say that they're going to be working to get the maximum amount of HBAR community members that they can to join this one. And one of the things that I like about the Dead Pixels Club is they can stand alone. It's not just the bust, it's not just the head, even though I like a lot of those collections as well. It can stand alone. These characters can be used in animation, they can be used in graphics, and so on. So great job all around. It's one of my favorites, as I mentioned, and I got one already sitting in my wallet. So next week, I think I'm going to feature Lorelei's Sad Cats collection. Of course, she was just interviewed by Genfinity and tugged at everybody's heartstrings. I think she's doing a great job, and she deserves some more attention. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get into some DeFi. So right now we have $45.5 million total value locked in the Hedera DeFi ecosystem. 41.8 of that is on Saucer Swap, 2.2 million on HSuite, and I'm happy to see HeliSwap holding tough and taking some market share with 1.5 million. Moving to the HBAR and crypto markets, crypto had a tough week as it seems less likely that the Fed will be aggressive when they're cutting rates. Bitcoin is off 1.3% on the day and 7% on the week to $58,800. The HBAR didn't fare any better, down about the same over the past day and 13% over the past week to just over 5 cents. This is a range of support, but if the broader crypto market continues to drop, HBAR will follow. So since I've lost access to my HBAR Foundation account, and that's how I maintained a lot of my communication, I'm going to lose the ability to interview the people that I wanted to interview next week, unless they can contact me some other way. But if you guys have any suggestions on who I should interview, go ahead and let me know, and I'll try to get in touch with them. Of course, we are going to get Rob back for Shark Bites. I can get a hold of him pretty easily. So if you have any more questions for him, drop those down in the comments. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.